In the spring of 1944, in a prison camp deep inside Nazi Germany, over 600 men were digging 3 tunnels beneath the feet of their guards. They called them Tom, Dick, and Harry. The plan was audacious to the point of madness to break out not 1 or 2 men, but 250 in a single night. It would become the most famous prison break in history. And for most of the men involved, it would cost them everything. This is the true story of the Great Escape. Stalag Luft III was a prisoner of war camp built specifically to hold captured Allied airmen. Located near the town of Sagan, in what is now Poland, it was run by the German Luftwaffe. The Germans believed it was escape-proof. The camp sat on sandy soil that made tunneling difficult. The barracks were raised off the ground so guards could see any digging. Microphones were buried around the perimeter to detect the sound of tunneling. Germans had thought of everything, or so they believed. The men held here were not ordinary soldiers. They were pilots, navigators, and bomber crews from Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Poland, and many other nations. Many had been shot down over occupied Europe. They were educated, resourceful, and united by a single obsession: escape. Under the rules of war, it was considered an officer's duty to try. And among them was a man who would turn that duty into the most ambitious escape plan ever conceived. His name was Roger Bushell, South African-born British officer, a barrister by training, and a fighter pilot shot down in 1940. Charismatic, brilliant, and driven by a burning hatred of his captors, Bushell became the head of the camp's escape organization. His code name was Big X. He conceived a plan so bold it stunned even his fellow officers to dig 3 tunnels at once and break out 250 men in one go, but had never been attempted on such a scale. Bushell knew the risks, pressed on regardless. Bushell's plan required an organization of extraordinary complexity. Over 600 prisoners would eventually be involved. They would need forged documents, civilian clothing, maps, compasses, and rations, all made by hand, in secret, under the noses of the guards. Each task was assigned to a department. There were forgers, tailors, engineers, map makers, and lookouts. It was in effect a secret factory hidden inside a prison. And at its heart lay the 3 tunnels. The 3 tunnels were given code names Tom, Dick, and Harry. From that moment, the word tunnel was never to be spoken aloud again, in case a guard overheard. Each tunnel began beneath a different barracks, its entrance hidden with ingenious care. Harry's entrance was concealed beneath a stove that was kept burning. Dick's was hidden in a washroom drain. Tom's lay beneath a dark corner. The digging was about to begin, 30 feet down into the sandy earth. The digging was brutal and dangerous work. The sandy soil collapsed easily, threatening to bury the diggers alive. To hold back the walls, the men needed timber, and they took it from their own beds, stripping wooden boards from bunks until each bed had barely enough to sleep on. Thousands of boards disappeared into the tunnels. The diggers worked in near darkness, lying flat in a space barely wider than their shoulders, scraping forward inch by inch. Every tunnel created a devastating problem: the sand. Bright yellow and utterly different from the gray topsoil of the camp, it could not simply be dumped in the open. Tons of it had to be hidden. The men devised an ingenious solution. They made bags from trouser legs, hung them inside their clothing, and released the sand through their pockets while walking the camp, scattering it with their feet. These men became known as penguins for their waddling walk. Thousands of trips were made. As the tunnels grew longer, the challenges multiplied. The air grew thin, so the men built a pump from kit bags and wood to force fresh air down the shaft. Darkness was total, so they tapped illegally into the camp's electrical wiring to string up lights. To move the diggers in the sand, they built a wooden railway with trolleys running the length of the tunnel. It was engineering of remarkable ingenuity, all improvised from scraps, all hidden beneath the earth. Above ground, the work was just as painstaking. The forgery department, led by a gifted artist, produced fake travel permits, identity cards, and passes copied by hand, letter by letter, stamp by stamp. A single document could take weeks. They mixed their own inks, carved rubber stamps from boothiels, and studied real German paperwork smuggled from guards. The forgeries had to be perfect. A single flaw could mean death for the man who carried it. The tailors transformed military uniforms into passable civilian clothing, dyeing fabric with beetroot and boot polish, fashioning suits and coats that could pass a casual glance. The mapmakers reproduced hundreds of maps of the surrounding country, tracing rail lines and routes to neutral borders. Every escaper would need to know exactly where to go. Nothing was left to chance. Whole camp had become a machine with one purpose. Then, disaster struck. In September 1943, a guard, probing the ground almost by chance, discovered the entrance to the tunnel that was nearest to completion. Months of back-breaking work were lost in an instant. The Germans destroyed it with explosives. It was a crushing blow. But the men made a fateful decision. They would quietly abandon Dick, using it only for storage, and pour everything into finishing Harry. Through the winter of 1943 and into 1944, work on Harry continued in secret. It stretched over 300 feet, reaching out beyond the wire toward the cover of the forest. By March 1944, it was almost ready. The men made their final preparations. Documents were dated, clothing was fitted, rations were packed. Date was chosen, the night of the 24th of March 1944, when the moon would be dark. The escape was on. On the night of the 24th of March, 200 men prepared to escape. Dressed as civilians, clutching forged papers, they gathered in the barracks above Harry's entrance. One by one, they lowered themselves into the tunnel and waited in the darkness. But almost at once, things began to go wrong. The tunnel had been dug in a hurry. When the first man reached the far end and pushed up the exit hatch, he made a terrible discovery. The exit had come up short. Instead of emerging inside the tree line as planned, the hole opened in the open ground. Several feet short of the forest and dangerously close to a guard tower. The men were horrified. Anyone climbing out would be exposed. They improvised a signal system. A rope tugged when the coast was clear, but it slowed everything to a crawl. Instead of one man every minute, barely a dozen got out each hour. Precious time was slipping away. One by one, through the long freezing night, the men crawled out and vanished into the darkness. Some headed for railway stations, clutching forged tickets, hoping to pass as foreign workers. Others set off cross-country on foot, trekking through the snow toward distant neutral borders. Each man carried his fake identity, his map, and his hopes. For a few hours, the impossible seemed within reach. 76 men made it out of the tunnel and into occupied Germany. Then, in the early hours of the morning, it happened. A guard walking the perimeter noticed a man emerging from the ground. The alarm was raised. Inside the tunnel, men scrambled back. In the barracks, prisoners frantically burned forged papers and destroyed evidence. 76 had escaped. 77th was caught at the tunnel mouth. The Great Escape was over, and the manhunt was about to begin. The escape triggered one of the largest manhunts of the entire war. Furious at the humiliation, the Nazi high command ordered a nationwide search. Tens of thousands of personnel, police, soldiers, and civilians were mobilized to hunt down the 76 escapers. Roadblocks were thrown up. Stations were watched. Papers were checked and rechecked. For the men on the run, cold, exhausted, and far from safety, the net was closing fast. One by one, the escapers were caught. Cold and hunger drove some to surrender. Others were stopped at checkpoints, their forged papers finally failing under close inspection. Within days, most of the 76 were back in captivity. Only a handful remained free. The men had known escape was a long shot. What none of them could have imagined was the fate that awaited so many of those recaptured. Of the 76 men who escaped, only 3 would reach freedom. 2 Norwegian pilots made their way north, boarded a ship, and sailed to neutral Sweden. A Dutch pilot traveled across occupied Europe and reached Spain and then Gibraltar. 3 men out of 600 who had labored, out of 76 who had crawled through Harry, 3 home runs. Their success proved it could be done, but the price paid by the others would shock the world. Enraged by the escape, Adolf Hitler personally intervened. In defiance of every convention of war governing the treatment of prisoners, an order was issued. A large number of the recaptured officers were not to be returned to the camp. Instead, they were to be handed to the secret police, taken away, and shot. It was a cold-blooded decision and a clear war crime. The men who had escaped had done nothing but their duty as officers. It would make no difference. In the days that followed, 50 of the recaptured airmen were murdered. taken from custody in small groups, driven to remote locations, and killed. Among them was Roger Bushell, Big X, the man who had masterminded the entire escape. The Germans claimed the men had been shot while trying to escape again. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. The news sent a wave of horror through the camp and around the world. When the men of Stalag Luft III learned the fate of their comrades, the camp fell silent with grief. These were friends, colleagues, men they had dug alongside in the darkness. In their memory, the prisoners requested permission to build a stone memorial to the 50. Remarkably, permission was granted. The prisoners built it with their own hands, a lasting tribute to the men who had died for the crime of trying to be free. After the war ended, the murders were not forgotten. The Royal Air Force launched a determined investigation to hunt down those responsible for killing the 50. Investigators spent years tracking the perpetrators across a shattered, occupied Germany. Many were found. Many were brought to trial for the murders. It was a rare pursuit of justice for a specific war crime driven by the determination that the 50 would not be forgotten, and that their killers would answer for what they had done. It is worth asking why. Why did 600 men risk so much, knowing the danger? Part of the answer lay in duty, the belief that a captured officer must try to escape, to tie down enemy resources and return to the fight. Every guard hunting escapers was a guard not fighting at the front. But it was more than duty, it was defiance. In a place designed to break their spirit, the tunnels were proof that their spirit remained unbroken. The Great Escape is remembered not only for its tragedy, but for its staggering ingenuity. The tunnels, the forged documents, the homemade tools, the air pumps and railways built from scraps, all of it improvised by men with nothing but their wits and their determination. Military engineers have studied it with admiration ever since. It stands as a testament to what the human mind can achieve, even in the bleakest of circumstances. In the decades after the war, the story of the Great Escape spread across the world. Books were written by the men who had been there. In 1963, it became one of the most famous war films ever made, watched by millions. The story passed into legend. But behind the legend were real men, real names, real faces, real sacrifice. 50 of them never came home. Today, at the site of Stalag Luft III, memorials stand in honor of the 50. The line of Harry's tunnel is marked upon the ground, so visitors can walk its length above the earth. Each year, people come to remember. The names of the 50 are read. They were young men from many nations, who wanted only to be free, and who paid for that desire with their lives. The men of the Great Escape represent something that reaches beyond any single war. They represent the refusal to surrender the spirit even when everything has been taken away. They dug in darkness toward a light they might never reach. Most were caught, 50 were murdered. Only 3 found freedom. And yet, by any measure that matters, they had already won because they never stopped trying. 76 men crawled through a tunnel called Harry into the freezing German night. 3 reached freedom. 50 paid with their lives. They were pilots and navigators, sons and brothers from a dozen nations, united by an unbreakable will to be free. We remember them. If this story moved you, take a moment to honor their memory and subscribe so their stories are never forgotten. Thank you for watching History in Flames.